Thank you all for the welcome. I'm incredibly excited to be here. Let's talk about incidents. So speaking with customers over the last year, what's become really clear to me is that there are some key differentiators between the organizations that manage their incidents effectively and the ones that don't. So my goal here today, whether you're in the audience or watching on at home in the live stream, is to really give you those tangible tips and best practices that will help you close the gap and start operating like the world's best incident response teams. Let's start by getting on the same page about exactly what type of incident we're talking about. Today's talk is about major incidents, an unanticipated disruption that inhibits the functioning of a service. Those real emergencies that on a major scale get in the way of your customers actually using your service, whether they can't access it at all, a critical function isn't working as it should be, or there'd actually be an impending emergency if you didn't act immediately. And there are two key reasons I think it's important that we talk about this. Firstly, the impact of major incidents on organizations like yours is larger than it's ever been before. As Scott mentioned during the general session, customers are demanding that 24/7 availability, they're demanding that uptime, and it's getting increasingly difficult to provide that type of service. I'm sure you can recall when you try to send a text message and it doesn't work, or you can't get the directions that you need on Google Maps. It's something that's incredibly frustrating for you, and the same applies to the customers of your software solutions. So when you fail to meet that need, it's potentially clearly measurable in terms of revenue lost, but there's also a reputational impact too that it's important to be aware of. Second key point here, what's making things even more challenging for teams is that complexity is growing in conjunction with that demand. So there are now more systems. You're potentially running microservices, and those services are generating more alerts, and there's more noise in your logs, more things to be keeping track of. And now because of that customer demand, there are even more people that are stakeholders in the status of your services. They want to know what's going on, and they want to see how they can help because it's so crucial to be doing that correctly. And I see a lot of teams struggle with this, and if you don't manage it effectively, it can actually make things worse, not better. So thankfully, we've been working incredibly hard. We've got some really smart people working on this, actually building the tools that you need for modern incident management so that all you need to do is implement the process that I'm going to be outlining clearly today. Quick show of hands, do we have any Opsgenie users in the audience? Anyone that's tried the product? Okay, cool, a few people. So we'll be looking at Opsgenie today, a bunch of cool new features that we've just announced this morning. We'll also be looking at Jira Service Desk, Status Page, and of course Jira Software. So everything you need on the technology side to really transform your incident management process. So just one quick caveat before we begin. What this talk won't do is it's not going to mean that you'll never have an incident again. But what it is going to do is really help you thrive in an always-on world and turn your organization, put it into a place where you're seeing less major incidents over time. You're continuously improving, and you're actually turning the reliability of your services into a competitive advantage for your business. So let's dive in. These are the 4 key takeaways that I want to leave you with today. Just the 4, and I really racked my brain trying to think about what to fit in here because there is so much to say, but I think this is really what it all boils down to. And if it seems a bit high level, don't worry, because we'll be going through each of them individually and pulling out the individual tips that you can maybe check in your own mind to see if you're implementing in your organization. So we're going to break it down, tangible tips, best practices. We've got breaking down team silos, communication, how to do it the right way, having a game plan and how to run one, review one, and also postmortems and running those blamelessly and collaboratively. Now you notice on the left-hand side of the slide, we've got one word for each of the key takeaways: detect, respond, resolve, and learn. And when you pull these out, you actually have the 4 phases that cover your whole incident lifecycle. So that's the core foundation that we're going to be using today. You've got one tip for every phase of your incident. And the reason that I've structured the talk this way is because in the teams that I've spoken with, the very best teams, they actually find that when they start strong, that has a knock-on effect and they end up really finishing strong. So the teams that do well in their detection, their response is that much easier, and then if they're communicating effectively during that second phase, they've got customers off their back, they've got management off their back, and they can focus on resolving the issue at hand. So there's a reason we're going through it chronologically, and just think about that knock-on effect as you do manage incidents in your organization. Now we've got a tracker at the bottom of the slide for mean time to recovery, MTTR, and it's from when the incident first starts to when it's actually fully resolved. And those of you in the audience that are keen-eyed might have noticed that it doesn't actually span the learning phase. It's just the first 3 phases of an incident. And one classic mistake that I see here is organizations see that and they think that there's no real tangible improvement they can achieve in that metric by taking up those learning actions, those preventative follow-up tasks and postmortems. And we're going to look at why that isn't the case, why that's not the right thing to be doing, and how you can actually achieve the most meaningful improvement to help you resolve incidents faster by conducting learning in the right way. So let's get started. Now, when it comes to a major incident, you want to find out before your customers do. But in most organizations today, even when a customer spots an incident first, that doesn't kick off the right process to actually get that resolved before it's too late. So I'm sure you're familiar with the scenario. Service desk agents receive a ticket from a customer having trouble with part of the product. A Jira issue is created for developers, and no one really thinks to look at it until you've got a full-blown emergency on your hands, until you actually realize that it's affecting everybody. And it happens because your teams use different products. So your support agents are in Jira Service Desk responding to customers. Your developers are in Jira Software and in Opsgenie and other DevOps tools, and management might be in Slack or email messaging individuals. So there's all this chatter going on, but customer information that could actually be critical to resolving the problem faster, it's not getting to the right people. And I'm sure this is something that resonates with all of you, especially those of you on the IT side of the business, because actually 92% of individuals in IT departments actually felt uninvolved in their company's DevOps activities and ambitions. So all this work going on to release quickly and the you build it, you run it methodology, but actually big parts of the business that play a critical role in the running and operation of those services actually aren't involved in the way that they should be. So let's make this better. Let's show off a quick demo, because you'll find the solution to actually breaking down team silos is to check out one of the pretty neat integrations that we have. I think it's going to illustrate this quite well. So we're going to link up Jira Service Desk and Opsgenie, and we're just going to jump over to our Jira Service Desk project settings. Now, for those of you on-premise, potentially server or data center, these tutorials still apply. The screenshots are just cloud-based, but very much the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an automation rule in the top right-hand side here, and that's going to allow me to create a custom configuration rule where I can define with actually whatever level of granularity I like what I want to occur when something happens in one of my service desk portals. So in this case, I've declared that when an issue is created, and you might want to go even further and say when an issue is created in my outages portal, actually send that straight through to Opsgenie, as well as making it available for my agents to respond to. And what this will achieve for you on the Opsgenie side of things is that now when my developers are looking at their automated alerts, they're looking at those Splunk logs or those AWS error messages that could be indicative of a serious issue, they're actually seeing the customer outage issues that have been sent through as well, and they get all the detail, the title, the description, and they can actually click straight through to that, potentially see it in line with an AWS error and go, okay, this is actually a serious issue that I need to take action on, and they can leave a comment that will be sent straight through to Jira Service Desk for agents to look at so that they get an idea of what's going on, and then for agents to reply to directly, which will be sent straight back in to the Opsgenie side of things. So that's really just one example, but the key thing to take away here is to think about the tools that you're using in your organization, the products, and which ones are actually very centric to a single silo in the business, and see if you can link that up with some of the integrations that we have at Atlassian or potentially some of your other tools, and see if it'll get teams communicating more effectively and potentially get you more involved on the IT side of things. So moving on to the second key takeaway, communicate early and often. And really, this is a key differentiator from the teams that I spoke to. The ones that communicated well, they actually had the best incident response process. So think about, maybe ask yourself, how effective is your communication during an incident? Let's dive into some fundamental ways to avoid strain between you and your customers and make sure you're going about this in the right way. So the first thing that you want to do is have a templated first comms ready. When that serious outage occurs, what you're going to see is a bunch of service desk tickets popping up from customers. You may be receiving tweets or emails or Slack messages from people in the organization just trying to make you aware that something's wrong and potentially checking in for an update. So you want to get ahead of that by automating your first communications and making it nice and simple to just send something out, get it out there, and help yourself focus on resolving the issue. The next big tip, don't rely on your usual infrastructure. So many teams for their service update or status pages, they actually build their own and they host it in the same place as the rest of their services. So when that major outage occurs and customers are flooding that page just to see if they can get some sort of update on what's going on, they see a blank screen, or worse yet, they maybe even see an error message. So something that's really easy to avoid. Status page offers a great solution to this. They're cloud-based, they're hosted externally. You don't have to use that product, but really those key principles. Make sure it's not in the same place as the rest of your infrastructure. Next quick point, make sure you're considering your internal stakeholder update pages. So it doesn't have to be the same update as the ones that you're sending out externally. Some teams like to separate these out, but have them under the same user interface so that you don't need to log into something separate. You can just send an update out, send the second one out in the same tool, and move on with resolving the incident. And finally, I want you to see it as an opportunity to build trust. So when you think about the very best teams when it comes to resolving incidents or incident management in general, they're not the ones that don't experience outages. They're not the ones that don't experience incidents. Rather, they communicate early and often. They share what they know with customers. And even though incidents are an incredibly frustrating thing, they actually take that opportunity to really walk the walk when it comes to putting customers first. So it's a really big thing for me, and you definitely see the very best organizations like Google, Amazon really take this up. So I want to look at a quick demo here for templating your first communications, because I want to show you really how easy it is. We're going to go through the full end-to-end flow. So I'm going to click over here to the status page product, and I want to cover the case of my mobile app experiencing an incident. I know it's an important service for me that's had trouble in the past, so when that next incident occurs, I don't want to waste time thinking about the exact wording. So I'm going to create a quick template here that just covers a general initial message to let customers know that I'm investigating. I'm going to pick the mobile app component and hit the save button, which means that that template is now ready to go. Now let's fast forward to that real mobile app incident occurring at some point in the future and see how quick it is here to actually send that update. I'm going to hit the create incident button. I'm going to go to the top right of the page and hit that template that I just created and then hit the save button. Those communications have been sent out. It only took 3 seconds, and I can go straight back to focusing on resolving the problem at hand. Now next up, we're going to integrate status page with our service desk portal as well. So that update that I just created that only took a few moments, if I go into Jira add-ons and install the one for status page, I'll see it come up right at the top here. So it's actually centralizing my status update so that I don't need to go to email to send an update out and then go to Twitter and then go to my status page and potentially even Slack. I've picked the one place, my status page product, to send that one update, and now it's tightly integrated to and centralized to go to all of the right places I need it to, sending out the one update instead of the 5 or more. So that's communication. Now let's move on to the third phase of your incident. And hopefully by this point, your team is really battle ready. You've integrated your products, information's flowing through all of your teams, and you've sent your comms out through status page. Everyone's ready to go. The situation is, for the most part, under control, but this is a really crucial part where going about it in the right way can make all the difference. What you need to do here is set, share, run, and review your game plan. Let's look at what you need to cover. Got to get a quick show of hands. How many people actually have an incident game plan in their organization, some type of run book that they can look to? Cool. Just a few hands. Great. So for everyone that kept their hands down, if you don't have one of these, you're going to want to write one up, define it, put it in writing. And a few essential things that you'll need to include, and for everyone in the audience, maybe just check this off mentally and see if you're covering these checkpoints. First one is your assessment and severity criteria. So you need to establish impact. Ask your readers to consider how many customers may be affected. What are they currently seeing? Is this a potential security breach, or is there even data loss? These are all questions that we ask ourselves at Atlassian because it helps us to actually make that right call on the level of severity that we're going to be selecting and do it quickly. So when you've got that total outage, it's a very different response to one button not working for a handful of users, and you want to make that clear with clear examples and next steps for each level of severity so that first responders know exactly what actions to take and you can kickstart your response in the right way. Moving on, escalation rules. So make sure everyone knows that they should never hesitate to escalate. Especially more junior team members, maybe it's the middle of the night, there's a bit of a problem and they think, oh, I'll just revert this deployment, or I'll push some code, everything's gonna be okay. And then what you find is 2 hours later, the problem's gone on, you've affected thousands more customers than you needed to. And it was all because one person might have had that fear to wake everybody up. Now at Atlassian, and really the largest and most effective organizations when it comes to this, we don't hesitate to escalate at all. If you even think there's a slither of a possibility that this could be something major, wake everybody up, bring the right people in immediately, and if it's a false alarm, no one's going to be mad at you. Next up, roles and individual authority. So another really big thing for us at Atlassian, we have an incident commander for every incident that has that high level authority over things. He's the go-to person, he or she is the go-to person for every incident. And it really helps to ensure you've got that right level of organization and effectiveness in your response, especially when so many people are involved. Also consider if it makes sense for you to have a senior technical responder, someone to make the call on which deployments to investigate or what type of code to push. It'll especially help with allowing less experienced team members to get involved in the incident response process or take on some of that on-call responsibility without you actually being worried that they're going to make the wrong decision and actually waste a few hours or impact more customers than necessary. And finally, consider your communications cadence when you're writing this up. So think about how often you want your comms to be sent out. Is it every hour, every 2 hours, every 3 hours? It really makes a difference here at the end of your update to say something as simple as, we don't have anything to share at the moment, but we'll post our next comms in an hour. And when you're a customer that's really hanging on to an enterprise service, coming back up to health, that makes a world of difference for you. So thinking back to those points I shared on communication, it's an opportunity to build trust, but it's also an opportunity to just communicate effectively with your customers and help them get on with things. Now to circle back to roles really quickly, I have a quick video to play from one of our lead principal architects at Atlassian, and I want to drive this point home, so I asked him to share a few words with you guys, and play that video now.
One of the most notable things about an incident at Atlassian is something you notice during the incident, and that's the clear presence of the incident manager or incident commander. The commander has clear authority, everyone knows what that role is, and everyone respects the person who's in that role. It makes it instantly clear who's responsible for making decisions. You don't get people making contradictory decisions, and it's a single authority for the status of the system. Therefore, it's very clear whether the problem has been resolved or not. And stakeholders can trust that when they've been told what the status of this incident is, that they're actually being told what's really happening. The incident commander is always the calm at the center of the storm.
So that was Matt Quayle, one of our lead principal architects here at Atlassian, and he's been with us for over 11 years, someone who has no doubt seen his fair share of really major incidents, someone who knows their stuff. So now that you've got a game plan in place, how do you make sure that this all gets put into practice, actually becomes valuable for you? What you need to do here is share your game plan. So propagate it throughout your organization and make sure all responders have read and understand it. And ask them for feedback. Put it in Confluence so that it's available to everyone where your team works and they can have a quick look over it and pick up on anything that maybe doesn't make so much sense to them. Next up, you've got this game plan written up, it's been reviewed. What you need to do is actually run a simulation drill. Hands up, has anyone partaken in an incident simulation or a war game before? One or two of you? Okay, cool. Yeah, so those of you in software will know that nothing's really truly verified until you've tested it. And the same goes for your game plan. So what you want to be doing is to have someone replicate as close to a real production environment as possible, or whatever would make most sense for your business, and actually create an incident there. Run through it as if it were the real thing. And it's going to give you two major advantages. First one is you'll be able to shore up those quick wins in your game plan, things that made sense on paper but didn't work as well in reality, and you'll be able to do that before the big incident comes up. The second big thing this will give you, and I used to play football when I was a kid, you wouldn't go into a grand final without having kicked a ball for 3 months. And you shouldn't do the same thing here. So it gives you that speed and muscle memory and really automatic ability to just work through the real thing because you've done it so many times before and you're ready to go. So make sure you set a cadence for this sort of dry run. Something like quarterly would work well, and it'll help you stay fresh to really manage those incidents and can be pretty fun as well. Final point on this, make sure you're involving less experienced teammates. It definitely helps them take on that on-call responsibility. You can trust that they've been through something similar with the process before and they'll be ready to go again when it comes to working on production. Last quick step for the game plan. Once you've gone through a few incidents actually using this criteria, just ask yourself really quickly, do we still follow this process? Do we do things differently because 2 weeks ago we had an incident and we figured out we could get through things 2 times faster if we went about it in a slightly different way? Document those things, update the game plan for posterity so that actually new individuals that come onto your organization, they've got something that's up to date. You don't want this to go stale after all of your hard work. So hopefully some valuable nuggets there you can take away for building a game plan. Now let's move on to postmortems. Now, we spoke a bit about this last year at a few of our track talks and keynotes, but this year one key difference is that we've actually built the core capability for postmortems into our OpsGenie product so that you can go straight from alert to incident and then pulling through all that key information automatically inside a UI that is very similar to what you'd be familiar with in other Atlassian products. So we're going to look at that really quick, walk through it, and we're also going to cover the best practices, so what you need to be thinking about when you're writing a postmortem. So let's move over to OpsGenie. I'm here on an incident page, the incident for my mobile application, and you'll see here that the problem's been resolved. I've got my incident timeline on the right-hand side that chronicles all of the key events, and now I've got this button that's available for me to actually create a postmortem because the incident's been finished up. So I'm going to click through, and that'll take me over to the postmortem template that we've created for everybody. And you can change this, configure it however you like, but it's quite a good framework to actually start working through the problem and ask yourself, okay, what happened in the lead up? What are the preventative actions that we could have taken here? What was the root cause of this incident, the lessons that we learned? And on the right-hand side, you'll see that because it's linked into OpsGenie, we can automatically populate all of that key information without you having to arduously go through and do it yourself. So no mental maths on the incident that started at 9 and finished at 11:53. How long did it go on for? 2 hours and a bit. We're just going to calculate it for you, pull through who the incident commander was, the severity, all those key bits of information that you want to be keeping track of but don't want to do the work doing. And you've also got the opportunity here to add attachments, add any related incidents. Potentially maybe a database went down in conjunction with your mobile app and 2 teams were working on that separately. You can bring it all under the same postmortem and of course add those key preventative actions, those follow-up tasks, integrated directly into Jira. So now we've filled one of these out, we've put in all the work. It should look something like this. This is actually a real Atlassian postmortem that we've changed sensitive information on, and what you can see is that there's actually been quite a bit of work put into, 1, providing a quick summary of the incident, and then 2, actually going through, tidying up that incident timeline, going through it manually and potentially adding any events that automatically weren't picked up, changing timestamps, obviously putting in all of the answers for detection, lead up, etc. And also at the bottom here, I'm going to attach some attachments. I'm going to throw in some follow-up tasks in Jira because I want to make sure that all of the learnings, all of the hard work is actually going to make it into our production environment. So follow-up tasks linked right at the bottom there to my Jira instance, and I can follow on the status of those directly from the postmortem. And this is all functionality that is available as of today inside the Opsgenie product. So what do you need to remember when you're writing one of these postmortems, when you're running a postmortems process in your organization? Well, first off, you want to avoid blame, keep it constructive. I've given it away in the key takeaway itself. So the teams that aren't really as strong as this, and they have kind of a blame culture when it comes to their postmortems, individuals are afraid to speak up. They don't want to say, oh, hey, I actually deleted that production database, I didn't have the right credentials, I didn't see the right message, and I made that mistake. And they're not going to put their hand up and tell you that, which means that you're not going to be able to make the key change to that environment, potentially a password or extra layer of security to make sure it doesn't happen again. So keep your postmortems blameless and make sure that everybody knows that you've got a culture of trust and that there's no problem to say that you actually did something that obviously was well-intentioned but didn't work out as you expected. Next up, collaborate and share knowledge. So the postmortem might be written up by one person, but don't think that it's not a collaborative exercise. Postmortems at Atlassian, we kick them off with a postmortem meeting where everybody involved in the incident can take part, share what they learned, share anything that they think could lead to a more effective production environment or incident response process. Next up, give your postmortem a workflow. So ask yourself, does every incident above a Sev 2 require a full postmortem review? Potentially that extra layer where the CTO has to look over things. Or maybe minor incidents don't require a review at all. At Atlassian, the most severe incidents actually require 2 reviews from 2 individuals plus the person actually writing it up. So think about what sort of level of detail you want to go into here, and then maybe even document that in your game plan. Of course, preventative actions. So you saw how easy it was to create them inside the Opsgenie product, link them straight through to Jira. But I see a lot of teams actually put all that hard work into writing the postmortem, and then when it comes to thinking about, okay, what do we need to change? They gloss over that part, they see the same incident reoccurring, and it takes actually a lot longer to deal with those incidents as they recur. So make sure you think about the preventative actions, don't forego it, put those into Jira, link them up in Opsgenie, and then follow them through, make sure they get into production. Now finally, ask for feedback. So are there any people managers in this room, anyone overseeing any development work? Cool, few people. What you want to be doing is actually checking in with the people writing these postmortems and doing the work to make sure you're hitting the right level of time and detail that's required to get the learnings out of a postmortem, but not go any further than that. So we all know there are a bunch of competing priorities in a fast-moving software organization or IT team. There's a new feature that needs to be shipped or some work that needs to be done, some bugs to fix, and it can seem like if you're working on something that occurred last week ago and doing a retrospective review, you may feel like that's not the most productive thing to be doing. So just make sure that you're checking in and that when people are doing the work on that postmortem, they do just enough to get the key learnings out, but you don't have to do any more than that. So those are the 4 key takeaways here. And I got the chance to actually speak with some really great individuals at Amazon Web Services and talk to them a bit about how they do things. And that gave me the opportunity to refine some of the slides that I just shared earlier, but there were some key nuggets that didn't really fit that I felt were too good not to share. So I'm going to share a few of these and I hope some of them resonate with you. So the first thing Amazon does is they actually have a validation checklist before a service can even go into production. So does it meet their predefined requirements for monitoring, reliability, and security? If it doesn't, then it doesn't go into production. It needs to hit that minimum benchmark, and think about for yourself, this is before any incident even takes place. What's the minimum benchmark for you? What's the level of reliability that you want to be hitting? What sort of security guarantees do you want to be making to your customers? And that should be baked in here. Next up, Amazon, of course, runs with a DevOps methodology. We do the same at Atlassian, and that means that teams actually own the services that they run. But what do you do when you get that cross-service incident that impacts maybe 2, 3, 4, or more teams? You need someone at a higher level that can actually coordinate that response between teams and individuals. And for that, Amazon has a dedicated incident management team. And it makes it so much easier. Potentially, IT ops could take this role in your organization, but think about if that makes sense for you, especially if you're moving to DevOps. You don't want teams to be interacting with each other during something that's so serious and having that miscommunication occur because there isn't someone at a higher level that is the sole authority. And the final point, I had to harp on it. Amazon does it, Google does it, at Atlassian we do it. It's the most important thing that you can do to resolve your incidents faster. Run postmortems for all major incidents to prevent reoccurrence. It's going to make a huge difference for you, and I'd encourage you to try it if you haven't yet. So now, I wanted to make a quick point because I'm a bit of a technologist and I love to focus on the tech side of things, and I had so much fun sharing these demos today, but actually you won't be able to achieve any of this process improvement, any of this performance improvement without your teams. So really, you want to achieve the high performance that is the goal, but you're not going to be able to do it without putting your team first. You may have heard of Atlassian's belief that behind every great achievement there's a team, and we definitely go about this, and I think the way that you should look at doing it is to maybe even check out the health monitor. So run a quick 15-minute walkthrough at your next team meeting. It doesn't take too long, and it'll show you actually where your team is moving on key metrics like team health and leadership and customer centricity. We've got one specifically for service and support teams, and we have one for incident management teams as well. So this is something that doesn't tie in directly to the actual process improvements that you have in your incident response, but if you've got a happy team, if everyone's working well together, if they're functional and you invest that time ahead of time, you'll find that implementing process improvements becomes an order of magnitude easier. So let's flick back to those 4 key takeaways, go over them really quick and just wrap things up. So you want to break down your team silos. Think about the products that you're using and see if you can integrate them or couple them closer together so that information flows better between your teams. We installed a few integrations, only took a few moments to set up. You saw the one for Jira Service Desk and Status Page, and I'd encourage you to have a quick look over the Atlassian Marketplace or the app stores for any tools that you use and see what would be there for you. Next up, communication, early and often. So don't be afraid to get those first comms out straight away and do it ahead of time so that you don't have to worry about wording. You can get that approval as to if you've spoken about it in the right tone and manner, and then when that real incident occurs, you just click the button, go through the steps, the comms are out, and you can focus on resolving the problem. Make sure you're integrating as well. So centralize your comms through a single tool that's cloud-based and hosted externally so that you don't have to send 20 updates during the course of an incident because you're sending 4 and they have to go to 5 different places separately. Thirdly, set, share, run, and review your game plan. So only a few hands in the audience for actually having one of these in your organization, so hope to see more hands next year. And I'd also love for you to share it amongst your team and run a war game for the first time and make those review changes potentially on a quarterly cadence to make sure this stays fresh. And finally, blameless and collaborative postmortems. So we think it's the best way to resolve your incidents faster, and going about it in the right way where you actually create a culture of trust in your team to own up to what actually happened is going to make a world of difference for you. So that wraps things up. It's been a pleasure to speak to you all today, and hope I've given you some key things that are really going to make a difference for you. You can go back to your teams around the world and share some of this information. So I hope now that your team actually will thrive in an always-on world. I'd love to speak to some of you afterwards, take some questions, so feel free to come up for a chat. That's my presentation today, and yeah, thanks so much for listening in.